I'm Luke, and today we're diving down the tube of tunes to break down episode 3 of What If. Yes, every week here on Tube of Tunes we are going to be breaking down the latest episode of Marvel's What If. Or at least an episode of Marvel's What If. Maybe not quite the latest one. I am playing catch up a little bit at the moment. Now episode 3 is What If Earth Lost Its Mightiest Heroes. As always, this is going to be a full spoiler breakdown, so if you've not seen the episode yet, go and watch that before you watch this video, as I'm going to be spoiling pretty much everything. And before we start talking about the episode itself, please can I ask you to hit that like button. It really helps us out in the algorithm and lets us get seen by so many more people. Now this episode is actually set during Fury's big week, a pivotal moment during phase 1 of the MCU. This is the week where the events of Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk and Thor all take place. And this is something you can pick up on if you watch Iron Man 2. During that film, Coulson does get a call to go to New Mexico, and the post-credit scene does show him finding Mjolnir in the crater. And additionally, there is a scene during the film where you can see the battle between the Hulk and Abomination on the news. So it's very clear from the get-go that all these films are taking place at the same time. And if that couldn't be any clearer, there was a Fury's Big Week comic book series that was released as a prelude to the Avengers movie back in 2012 that documented all of the events from Nick Fury's point of view. And this episode is sort of a riff on that. It showcases events from these films from the point of view of Nick Fury as well as Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, but it's following them if events played out differently. I think this is fantastic. Much like in the first episode, you see events play out from those different films, but with a slight twist. But the twist here being that lots of different characters featured in those movies are being killed off. Specifically the characters who would go on to become the Avengers. I really love this. I love the whole idea of setting these episodes around the events of the films we already know. And it's almost like seeing extended sequences from those films. You're seeing what happens just around the corner. You see what other characters are doing during certain scenes, and you just get more background on what's happening with different characters that you didn't see in the film within those events. For instance, Hawkeye has quite a significant role in the Thor section of this episode, which is kind of ironic because even though he is in that original Thor movie, he probably has about one line, maybe about 10 seconds of screen time overall. Hawkeye has a much bigger role here than he does in that original film, but it does play on the fact that we know he is meant to be there during the events of that film. But we are getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. The film starts off, we see the scene from Iron Man 2 play out almost verbatim, until there is the moment where we see Natasha inject Tony with the antidote, which of course results in him dropping dead here. From there, events play out differently. We see Natasha is captured by S.H.I.E.L.D. by Brock Rumlow, the future Crossbones. It's nice to see that character from the future movie was still around during these events. And now with Nick Fury not being busy dealing with Tony Stark in the events of Iron Man 2, he himself goes to New Mexico to the events of Thor, and is present when Thor breaks into the S.H.I.E.L.D. compound. I also like the acknowledgement that Black Widow had previously approached Betty Ross from The Incredible Hulk about Bruce before. All those little nods were just really fun, and it was great to see characters who weren't in those original films were still somewhat tied to them. But of course, the biggest character that's brought in from a different movie into these events is that of Hank Pym. Because, I said spoilers, the big twist of the episode, the reveal of this murder mystery, is that it was Hank Pym all along. Because in this universe, that one small change was that Nick Fury had recruited Hope Van Dyne to being a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, where she is killed in a mission in Odessa. And this causes Hank Pym to act out in revenge and targets all the proposed members of Fury's Avengers Initiative. Now, there's a lot to unpack there. Firstly, Odessa, is that a Winter Soldier reference? In the movie Captain America the Winter Soldier, Black Widow tells us that she previously encountered the Winter Soldier on a mission in Odessa, where he shot the target by shooting a bullet clean through her. Well, maybe this is a reference that the same thing happened here, but with Hope in Natasha's place. And instead of the bullet just going through Hope's shoulder, it actually killed her also. Which is certainly interesting to think that had Hope been on the mission instead of Natasha, things wouldn't have ended quite so well. Sure, it is a shame that we don't get to see the one small change directly within this episode. More we see the blowback of it. I think it definitely works. I like the murder mystery aspect that the show employs here, and I think it's something that really takes advantage of this show's premise and working within the MCU, in that it doesn't actually necessarily give us all the information. All you need to know is that everyone, any character within the MCU is fair game as a suspect. Of course, we do get a few hints throughout the episode. Betty Ross tells us that there was a small projectile released from the syringe into Tony, and when Natasha is looking through the computer files, you do see mentions of Janet Van Dyne as a previous S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, and of course, before she is killed off, she does scream, "Hope, it's all about hope." As a viewer, I think you're meant to just assume hope as in the concept of hoping for a better day, hoping that they'll catch this killer. But no, of course, it refers to Hope Van Dyne, the character. That is actually something that I missed on my initial watch. The first time I heard it, I actually thought Natasha was screaming, "Hulk, it's all about Hulk," which was odd because Hulk was already dead in the episode. I wondered how it was all about him. No, I rewatched the episode, she's definitely shouting hope. And I know I'm not the only person that also heard the same thing. Now, the Hank Pym twist itself, he turns into this evil, murderous, megalomaniac type thing. Now, I know some people may be saying it's a little bit of a stretch that Hank Pym would become this murderous, evil villain. Sure, he's always been a little bit grouchy, and while he's had a disdain for the Starks, I could never really see him actually going through and killing him. Well, much like last week when I said it may have been a bit of a stretch that T'Challa was able to convince the Ravagers and Thanos to be good. That is the whole concept the episode was based around. That was the one small change. And the same can be said here. The whole one small change here is Hope dies and he wants revenge. While it may be a bit of a stretch, you kind of just have to go with it. But also, I will say, it's not a twist that seemed too left of field for me. I recognise that the character, at least in the comics and other adaptations, has always been a little bit prone to going off the rails. He has been portrayed as somewhat villainous, or at least very much in the wrong in the past. Hank Pym, traditionally as Ant-Man, was usually portrayed as being a bit of a pacifist. However, a different personality later developed for the character. Around the time when he changed his persona to the Yellow Jacket moniker, he became a little bit more edgy, his ethics becoming a little bit more questionable. I thought it was fantastic to see the acknowledgement of that here, because if you look, he isn't wearing the Ant-Man costume. Sure, he has the Ant-Man helmet, but he is actually wearing the Yellow Jacket costume. Yellow Jacket was, of course, the villain of the first Ant-Man movie, but he isn't in the comics. Yellow Jacket is Hank Pym. It was his more morally grey costume, and to see this sort of wild, out-of-the-box version of Hank Pym, it does ring very true to the character. To me, it doesn't feel so jarring to see it here. As long as I've known him since before I was born, Hank Pym has always been this somewhat corruptible hero, and I thought it worked really well here to see him in this villainous role. I thought it was a really fun twist. A tale like this could have only been told within the MCU structure. This really took full advantage of the what-if concept. I loved seeing Loki, how he came to Earth to avenge his brother's death, and then just took the opportunity to also rule Earth. Also, shout out to Jamie Alexander returning as Lady Sif. Between her one line here, a cameo in Loki, as well as her appearances in Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., she's clearly very much up for returning as the character whenever she can, which is one of the many reasons why I'm glad that she wasn't killed off alongside the Warriors 3 in Thor Ragnarok. Here's hoping to see that she's going to be back in Thor Love and Thunder. But of course, not all hope is lost, because this episode does end with Nick Fury still assembling a team of Avengers, because he uses his pager to call Captain Marvel. A pager which Coulson likes to remind us is from the 90s, because in case you didn't know, guys, Captain Marvel was set in the 90s. As well as finding Captain America frozen in ice as per the first Avenger. And so going forward, we will at least have a team of Captain Marvel and Captain America and Nick Fury leading a team of Avengers to fight Loki. And you know, maybe War Machine's also kicking around. At this point in Iron Man 2, he had already taken the suit, so it's possible that he could be teaming up with them. I don't know. I actually love this episode. So far, this was definitely my favourite episode. I just loved all the different references to the different MCU films and how they were able to weave all these different events together to create one narrative. We got a lot of the actors returning here to voice their characters. One particular notable role was Mark Ruffalo returned to voice Bruce Banner from the events of The Incredible Hulk, which is interesting because of course Mark Ruffalo did not play Bruce Banner in this film. It was Edward Norton, and the model of Bruce Banner within this episode does actually look somewhat reminiscent to Edward Norton, so So it's kind of weird to see the almost Edward Norton face with the Mark Ruffalo voice. It's definitely weird, but it's kind of a fun little acknowledgement. And I do imagine that Mark Ruffalo will be voicing Bruce Banner in multiple episodes of this series. So it is nice that they have got him here, as it just helps tie the series together with a cohesive voice cast. And it just reminds you that, yeah, sure, this is played by a different actor, but it is still meant to be that same version of the character. And while it is kind of weird, it is nice to see Mark Ruffalo within the events of this movie that he didn't actually star in. Tony Stark here was voiced by Mick Wingert, who actually has voiced the character previously in Avengers Assemble. He was the second voice actor in the last 2 seasons of that series, and as such, I'd say he's actually just using his normal Tony Stark voice that he has used previously. Now, to me, when I was listening to it, it sounded like Tony Stark because I have watched that series. I've seen him in the Avengers show, the Spider-Man show. To me, I accept his voice as being that of Iron Man. However, I will say he doesn't really sound like Robert Downey Jr., which does make it sound somewhat odd because Tony Stark's only lines in this episode are lines from the movie. That scene is a recreation of Iron Man 2, and like I said, the scene only changes once Tony dies, and so once Mick Wingert stops voicing the character. So it definitely does feel odd here. He doesn't sound like RDJ, but I do accept him as the voice of Iron Man because I'm just so used to hearing him as the voice of Iron Man. And I know coming up in the show we have an episode that's going to be Killmonger versus Tony Stark. I imagine Mick Wingert will be returning to voice the character here, and I'm sure it's going to sound a lot more natural because he's not recreating lines from Robert Downey Jr. I imagine he's going to have his own line, and I think it's going to be better there because, like I said, he does sound like Iron Man to me, just not RDJ's Iron Man. And the other notable voice replacement is that of Lake Bell as Natasha Romanoff, and I think she does a fantastic job. She's pretty much this episode's lead alongside Samuel Jackson's Nick Fury, and she's fantastic here. I think she sounds really close to Scarlett Johansson's voice. Some of the lines are indistinguishable in my opinion, but of course with all these sound-alikes there is the odd line where you can tell, yeah, it's definitely not that actor voicing them. And that's fine because at the end of the day it is performance first. I'd much rather an actor delivers a solid performance than just sound like the actor they're mimicking but not actually give a good delivery. And she's fantastic here. Lake Bell has a lot of voice acting under her belt and it shows. In terms of this series building to an eventual team up of all the different characters, I honestly don't think this episode is really going to contribute much here to that, as pretty much all the main characters from the episode died apart from Nick Fury himself. It's possible he could return, but I don't think there'd really be much novelty to that. It is just a version of Nick Fury. He isn't really that different from the one we know. And the main character that was used to promote this episode was Black Widow. Again, she's really just a version of Black Widow that we're very familiar with, just in a slightly different set of scenarios. So would it be that novel to see her return in the finale? No. And also, she's dead, so she probably isn't going to. The next episode coming up is that of the Dark Doctor Strange, the Doctor Strange Supreme, and that looks absolutely fantastic. If you want to get excited for that episode, rewatch Doctor Strange. And that's pretty much everything I've got to say about this episode. I hope you enjoyed this little fun breakdown. What did you think of this episode? Did you enjoy it as much as I did? It's not definitely my favourite so far. Let me know in a comment down below. And before we go, can I ask you to hit that like button? It really helps out the channel and lets it get seen. And if you haven't done so yet, why don't you hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell to be notified the next time we dive down the tube of tunes and break down an episode of Marvel's What If. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Cheers. Thanks for watching Tube of Tunes. If you want more from the channel, hit subscribe. If you want to keep up to date with what's going on, follow us on our socials. Hope you liked it. Cheers.